What's good, family? It's your man the YB back once again. So, I thought I'd do a quick breakdown on this Joyce versus Parker fight. And it's quite interesting the dynamics that have built up over the last little while. And me personally, I feel the same way I've been feeling. I feel Joyce, yeah, of course he can lose it, but I think Joyce is too much for Parker. However, it does have to be said. I mean, for me, Joyce versus Parker with Kevin Barry is literally a 99.9% win for Joyce. Now, I'd say Parker has a 10 or 20% chance. 10-15% chance of winning. Because he's teamed up with almost Team Fury. But ultimately, what I've learned recently, people are the same. You don't really change, especially when put under pressure. You are who you are. Now, will Joseph Parker prove me wrong? We'll find out. But in the main, people don't change. Yeah, look at AJ. Oh, bring a new trainer in. If anything, he got worse. You know what I mean? He's just as bad, kind of thing. Or other fighters like Canelo, for example. Canelo, he the same. Oh, I'm fighting old Lofkin. Goes in there and runs out of gas and just puts the same performance on. So yeah, I think where Team Fury addition to Parker will add value will be the first 6 rounds. And that's the danger part for Joyce. But is Parker going to knock Joyce out? Well, wait a minute. Parker couldn't knock out a knackered, old, put down and hurt Chisora. Parker couldn't finish his dinner. And in fact, the first fight with Chisora, he couldn't drop him. And I think that second fight with Parker and Chisora, I don't think Chisora trained at all. Because the first fight, when Chisora did train, the fight was a split decision. The next fight, Chisora went in there and he was gassed after about 2 rounds. Which wasn't the case in the first fight, which tells me I don't think he took it seriously. I think, you know what Chisora's like? Psychologically, yeah, if Chisora goes in there with you and he doesn't see much about you, he'll switch off in training. I think potentially, yeah, the first fight with Parker, Chisora was proper up for it. And that's why he came in good shape, and that's why it was a split decision. But then, the next fight, knowing Chisora, he probably sat back and thought, okay, he doesn't punch that hard, I'm not that impressed, I'm just going to turn up. And he was done after 3. Watch it yourself. Chisora was hanging by a thread after 2-3 rounds. And still, Parker, despite knocking him down a few times, couldn't finish his dinner. Which tells me there's no way he bangs hard enough to knock Joe Joyce out. Or even really, of course. If you hit Joe Joyce flush, he's going to do something. But I don't believe he has the power to drop him or really, again, he barely, to be quite frank, most of the knockdowns, most of the time Parker knocked down Chisora, it wasn't a, you know what I mean? It wasn't a neurological dysfunction. One of the knockdowns was Chisora didn't even go down. He was like on the ropes. That was one of them. And then the rest of them, he wasn't. For example, we've seen Wilder hit people, yeah, and you can see then what I call neurologically compromised. Yeah, their legs are going, and it's all, you can tell they're on stilts or whatever. When Parker knocked down old, washed up, knackered Chisora, he was never neurologically dysfunctioning. It was almost exhaustion and just a big shot with little gloves on. So I haven't seen enough. Now people are saying, well, YB Parker's been doing more power and this, that, the other. It might be the case. Is this going to be one of the new examples where a man goes from one strength to another? All I know is, in that second Chisora fight, Parker had been with Team Fury for about a year. Now, the main gains will be in that first year. People forget, a year is a lot of time. It's a year, do you know what I'm saying? Especially for athletes, when you're doing things twice a day. When you're training with someone twice a day, a year, that's where your main gains are going to be. You're not going to keep making physical gains, especially when it's not as if Parker hasn't been training already. Parker isn't suddenly, in my opinion, going to turn into Mike Tyson overnight. Not to mention, what I have seen consistently from Parker is, under Team Fury, he may be more explosive in them early rounds, but then again, he actually only put down Chisora once in the first half of the fight. which is round 4. And that, if my memory serves me correctly, that was the one where he stumbled against the ropes. So it wasn't even a clean knockdown. So most people agree the most dangerous part of the fight for Joyce is the first 6 rounds, when Parker's fresh. But for me, what the Chisora fight shows, after a year with Team Fury, fair enough, the first Chisora fight, yeah, they'd only been together for about 3 months. So fair enough, forget about that. But for the second one, they'd been together a year. And you can see here, look, Chisora counted in the 4th. Down once in the 7th. So for the first 6 rounds, for the first half of the fight, Chisora hadn't even been knocked down. And that's when Parker's the fastest and the most dangerous. So if you can't knock down Chisora in the first half, who by the way was gassed after 3 rounds, and find it hard to believe you're going to be able to hit Joyce. Don't forget, people, Joyce is bigger, which means it's going to have bird's eye view. So a lot of the shots he had that hit, and I'm not going to lie, Chisora's semi-elusive. He's not completely stiff. But what Chisora might have in semi-elusiveness, Joyce makes up for in height and dimensions. Yeah? When you're that 2-3 inches taller and longer, when you pull back, that's the difference. A lot of the shots that Parker has success with against Chisora in particular were short shots, uppercuts. You ain't gonna catch Joyce hunched over. You ain't gonna catch. I'll be very surprised if Parker hits Joyce with an uppercut full stop. I'll be very surprised, really, even the hooks as such. Because them short shots that Parker will throw, they might land against Chisora, who's smaller and slower and knackered. Joyce, who's a lot fresher, it's going to be harder to do. Now, if Parker had maybe come out and iced Chisora in the first half, it'd be a lot more, obviously, deadly. But historically speaking, you've had 2 fights with Chisora and you couldn't finish your dinner on any of them. The jury's out for me on that one. Now, is Parker going to come in with some miracle? Time will tell. What I will say is the danger shot for Joyce is obviously the overhand right. We've seen Hammer lit Joyce with it, and I've been tweeting Joyce heavy, telling him, and that's what pisses me off about these trainers, yeah. I don't understand it. Oh, everyone sucks him off, yeah. Oh, Cuban this, Cuban that, yeah. How can you train a man? And Joe Joyce has a great jab. His problem is, Joe Joyce walks around like this. His hands will be below his shoulder level. So he'll jab out like that, and then you'll see him stand up straight, square up, and just be standing there. Joyce, he likes to admire his work. So once Joyce gets a shot off, he's not looking for the exit. He'll get a shot off and just stand there, square up, and then that's where he gets hit. He needs to treat Parker with respect in the first half of the fight. Now, what Joyce has done well with previously, when Joyce fought Dubois, for example, Joyce clearly had a lot of respect for Dubois. And what you'll notice is, Dubois has a great right hand. Now, did Joyce get hit with a great right hand? Yes, he did. But notice, he wasn't getting, to be quite frank, Hammer hit Joyce as many times as Dubois did. Dubois hit Joyce a few times with a massive right hand, yeah. But Hammer was doing it like again and again and again. I believe that was because of a lack of respect. When Joyce was fighting Dubois, yeah, he was touching a jab and backpedaling. He was touching a jab and he was always looking for someone to come back. Joyce must approach the Parker fight, especially early, especially until you're comfortable, especially until you got your timing down and you got Parker's reactions down. Early in the fight, you can't do what you did against Hammer. Against Hammer, you were just walking forward and standing there and getting licked off. Don't do that against Parker. Give Parker at least enough respect for a few rounds until you're comfortable. If I was training Joyce, I'd have him going in there for the first 4 rounds, pure jab. Forget about anything else. Let's get this guy on the end of a jab. Single, double, triple. Touch him all over. And a tight recoil. Because the danger shot is, when Joyce gets his jab off, he brings his hand back here and the big right hand comes over. And what we have to admit is, Parker has top level speed. That's a fact. And Joyce has the opposite. Joyce is probably one of the slowest guys I've ever seen. And it's not the end of the world to be slow. If you're doing to be slow, yeah. Like, fast people can make up, like, for example, Roy Jones can make up for bad technique. In his prime, Roy Jones can drop his hands by his waist and do all kinds of mad shit. Roy Jones, one of the few men to put down James Toney. And that was because of pure cat-like reactions. But when you're slow, the bare bones basics you ain't going to get out of jail. You can't just twitch and get out of the way, like a David Haye, for example. So the basics, like recalling your hand back to your head, it's a must. And I don't understand. For someone like Joyce, in my opinion, he should be made for chin down, hands up, no? He should be made for his slow, his robotic, and he's got huge cardio. I'd love to see Joyce, with his hands high, properly, like Canelo, and just do his work from there. Because very rarely do you see Canelo's head snapping back, because his hands are up. People talk about, the Cuban style. Fuck the Cuban style, yeah? You got to know who you're working with. Joyce, for me, hands must be up and tight for his style. Yeah, when you're out of range, if you want to drop them a bit, fine. Yeah, if you want to give people a different look, fine. But for the most part, when you're about to commit to a double or a triple or a jab, high hands. What are we doing here? What's the point? A juggernaut shouldn't have his main prize wide open. Joyce gives away so much just with this lazy hand position, I feel. He opens the whole door up. Now, do I think Parker will be able to exploit it fully? I don't. I don't see Parker getting a stoppage. I don't see Parker getting a points win. I think Joyce I expect Joyce to win the last 6 rounds. In both Chisora fights, Parker was gassed after 6 rounds. He was as knackered as Chisora was. And that's the thing about Joyce. I think the reason Joyce has a lot of cardio is because he's not as explosive. I think Joyce is has pure aerobic, has pure, what they call it, pure slow twitch fibers in his muscles. Super slow. And what that means is there's a trade-off. Yeah, when you've got Mike Tyson fast twitch all through your body, you've got 4 rounds in you. And you're going to burn all your energy off. And you'll be gassed out of your mind. And I think Parker is a lot more explosive, but it comes at a cost. He will be hanging after 6 rounds. Joyce will just be getting started. And it will be that where I can see a stoppage for, I think, Joyce, stoppage from 7 to 12. Really, I think 9 to 12. Or points. It has to be said though, because of Parker's slickness and because of his speed, I wonder if Parker's raw speed and raw IQ will be enough to just avoid and keep himself cute. So that's what edges towards points, but I just don't see any way Parker. I mean, Parker's renowned historically as well for struggling against bigger men. When he was in there with AJ, he was shitting himself. He didn't want to commit. And that's the problem, you see, when you're a smaller man fighting a taller person, you have to be able to take the initiative. You have to be able to take the risk. Most fighters these days in particular, they don't want to have to commit themselves. They want to nick fights and whatever else. Now, to be fair to Parker, we did see Parker exchange with Chisora, but that's Chisora, a man who was finished for the last 9 rounds. Chisora was looking like a whole plate of food for the last 9 rounds. So it doesn't really mean much to say, oh, well, Parker was confident exchanging with Chisora. Yeah, Chisora looked like he was about to fall over at any minute. It's a whole nother ball game when you've got to commit, and you've got to commit to throwing shots when you're giving up the range. And you've got to step in and get jabbed in the head. It's a bit like, for example, Tyson Fury versus Chisora 2. Yeah? All night, Chisora had to break that distance down, and what did he get in return? His balance got jabbed off, and it's disheartening at the very least. Now, Fury is much quicker than Joyce, but still, whatever you say about Joyce, his jab is very accurate. Look what he did to Daniel Dubois. Joyce has supreme accuracy and supreme timing, which does to some extent make it for his speed. And whatever you say about Joyce so far, and he hasn't fought anyone of Joe's level of, obviously, well, yeah, Dubois, but Dubois is predictable and stiff, no head movement, so that's why he got butchered up. Parker has a bit more head movement. And that's why I see Parker going into survival mode for the last half of the fight. I think he'll fight hard for a few rounds, and when, like Canelo, once he gets tired, he'll go into passenger mode. Because people don't change their identity. Parker's always been known as number one, a fast starter, and number two, he doesn't really want to fight like that. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't really want to, you know what I mean? Parker will fight when the odds are in his favour massively. Otherwise, I mean, again, is Team Fury going to show us? Is Andy Lee going to show us a complete new Parker? I'm going to bet not. The odds say leopards don't change their stripes. Parker needed to close the range against AJ. He stood for the whole fight. Parker was on the edge of the ring, dancing around. What other fight was there? Andy Ruiz. Now, the reason I mentioned Andy Ruiz wasn't a tall guy like AJ and Joyce. What Andy Ruiz matched Joseph Parker's speed. Yeah, so when you saw Parker exchanging with Chisora, that's all well and good. Again, Parker will exchange with people he knows he has the edge with. It's a bit like the Hughie Fury fight. Yeah, look how Joe Parker fought Hughie Fury. He came marching forward, looking like Mike Tyson, literally. Moshed him. Next thing we know, he goes in there with AJ, who's got similar dimensions, and all of a sudden, he ain't trying to run forward no more. My point is, Parker, ultimately, I think maybe for a round or two, he might get over that typecasting. Maybe Andy Lee and maybe Tyson Fury can get in his ear and gas him up for a round or two. But ultimately, when he starts to get tired, when he starts to slow down, when Joe Joyce starts to hit him, he will go back to typecast, in my opinion, and he'll start shelling up and surviving. That's my base case. Now, there's odds, yeah, that Andy Lee's completely changed the guy and his whatever. But even if that was the case, that's the problem, you see. Even if Andy Lee has changed everything, yeah, he will still run out of gas, and that's the problem. Unless Joseph Parker gets Joyce out of there in the first 6, yeah, he's going to get tired, and Joyce is going to be there. And that's when Joyce gets started. And that's when Joyce starts letting his hands go. And that's when he's going to, at the very least, rack up the rounds. I can see Joyce winning the last 6. Now, like I said, Joyce need to go in there, get the jab going, keep your head on a swivel for the first 4 rounds, and then let your hands start going after that. Which really is kind of similar to the Dubois fight. In the Dubois fight, Joyce really only threw the jab. Now, I think Joyce can get his combinations going, but not in the first half. There's no point. Too much risk of getting countered. In the last half of the fight, Parker's going to be a lot slower, and he's going to be a lot less ambitious. And he's going to be have a lot less power as well, and a lot less speed. So the whole lot, it makes no sense to go in there and look to be a hero in certainly the first third of the fight, or certainly the first quarter. Really, if I was training Joyce, I don't think there's any rush for the first 6 rounds, to be quite frank. Maybe after 4, start experimenting in 5 and 6 with some combinations, but honestly, I'd have him on the end of the jab for the first 4 rounds. Keep him busy with that, and take him out of his game plan, and then build from there. But it's an interesting fight for what it's worth. And obviously, if Joe Parker pulls it off, I'll personally suck Andy Lee off. You know what I'm saying? Because that'll be a miracle. Because Parker, for me, he's never quite had it like that. Now, he's given it all the big front, but I have to remind people, this front from Parker, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. People forget. Go back and watch the Parker versus AJ build-up. Yeah? He was saying the same thing. Parker was putting videos out talking about AJ's Joshua, mate. Joshua, he chinny, mate. Oh, he chinny. I'm going to test that chin. Yeah? Dingo koala. Yeah? Dingo kangaroo. Koala. Oh, Joshua, mate. You're chinny, mate. Oh, dingo koala kangaroo. Yeah, he was giving it all that he was. And he went in there and there was no, you know what I mean? Not even about the fact he didn't get a KO. All the energy. It's one thing to say things on the outside of the ring, yeah. It's another thing when you've got a big wedge in front of you. Now, again, to be fair to Parker rather, AJ matched Parker for speed. So there was just no chance that Parker was going to dare try anything with AJ. With Joyce, that's why I think Parker will get off for maybe 3 rounds. And it will be Joyce's job for the first 3 to 4 rounds not to fight Joseph Parker's fight. And fighting Joseph Parker's fight would be, I'm going to go in there, I'm the juggernaut, I'm going to go in there with low hands and just start exchanging with the scarf to rip. That's just dumb. Makes no sense whatsoever, because at the very least you're going to pass the first 4 rounds to Parker. They'll be close rounds, because even if Joyce does go in there and start exchanging from the rip, it's just going to be, and even then, can Parker hit Joyce with a banger? Again, it's just too much risk. Way too much risk. But then again, who is Parker knocked out with 1 shot? Listen, at the end of the day, it's not Joyce's job to find out who, and it's not Joyce's job to find out who Parker's knocked out in, you know what I mean, with 1 shot. That's not your job. Your job is to win the fight. And what's the whole point of winning a fight? There's no medals, yeah? Number 1, there's no medals for losing. Number 1, there's no medals. No one's going to remember that you lost the first, you know what I mean? Well, no one's going to remember that the first 3 rounds were close. Because Joyce, I mean, to be quite frank, Joyce could even win the first 3 rounds by using the jab. That's another great point. I'm sitting here saying, well, Joyce should concentrate on dominating with a jab and keep his feet loose. But realistically, unless Parker's prepared to really walk through that danger zone, which I'd bet against, historically knowing Joseph Parker, Joyce could go in there and win just using the jab for the first few rounds. At which point, Parker's going to be knackered anyway. Do you know what I mean? There's no money, there's no medals for being a hero. Go in there, get a feel for it, and then start working. And I'm sorry, but the reason I feel these things should be obvious to a top team, but the fact that we had Ismael Salas, the fact that Ismael Salas sent Joe Joyce into a ring, with Christian Hammer, and had him eating huge shots from the same mistakes it's a bit like AJ. AJ is very similar. Make the same mistakes for years. Basic things. The basics aren't covered. I mean, really, AJ vs Usyk 2 was one of the first times we saw AJ with a tighter guard. How many years have I been saying that? We saw AJ vs Ruiz 1. AJ's like this. This is what no one ever like. Go back and watch it. AJ's, when he's under pressure, against Ruiz, his arms are like this. What the fuck? Oh, big stiff bodybuilder. You got Joyce in there with Hammer, just eating big ones, like he's standing there with his hands by his chest, just taking huge shots. It's like, what the fuck? Don't tell me about Cuban style and your basics aren't covered. And for the kind of fighter Joyce is, there's no excuse for it, man. There's no excuse. You're the Juggernaut. Why would the Juggernaut not have a Canelo-style defense? Why not? Someone needs to explain to me. Because the way Canelo fights people, he has his guard high and he walks forward. That's perfect for someone like Joyce. I think Joyce would be almost unstoppable, especially against these lower level guys, if he implemented that. The only reason Parker has any look into this fight, is because Joyce has wide holes open. That's the only reason. If Joyce had that Canelo style guard, there'd be no question. There'd be no chance. There'd be nothing Parker could do. Because any shots Parker throws, 90% of them are going to bounce off. Because defense is too tight. And I wonder what these guys be doing in camp. Because how can you not see that? We know Joe Joyce likes to throw shots. We know he likes to walk forward. That to me rings of a high guard. Instead, he walking around with his hands at shoulder height. Now I understand it. It's tiring to have your hands up, but what are you training for? Do you know what I'm saying? That's the whole point. People get into bad habits and then their conditioning evolves around that. Yeah? If you've been doing camps with your hands at shoulder height, that's what you'll get used to. If you do camps with your hands up properly, your arms will get used to that eventually. Anyway, let's see how it plays out. I've got Joyce from 7 to 12, or on points. I think maybe 9 to 12 as well. I think 9 to 12 or points. That's a good play. It's a good fight though. People say it's 50-50. I don't see that at all. Not from what Parker showed against Chisora anyway. And if you actually look at the cards, when you take out the knockdowns, the second fight with Parker and Joyce, Parker and Chisora, was also close. You can see it here, look. 112, 114. So there's 3 knockdowns, yeah? So Chisora would have won on that card if you take out the knockdowns. Even this one here. If you take out the knockdowns, that's pretty much a draw. Yeah? And I think maybe this one, if you take out the knockdowns, it's Chisora losing by 1 point. So, you know what I'm saying? It's not like Parker was dominating Chisora in either of the fights. And really, Chisora is a poor man's Joyce, in as much as his engine's nowhere. He's a pressure fighter, but his engine's nowhere near as good. His chin's nowhere near as good. And his jab is nowhere near as good. And his dimensions and attributes are nowhere near as good. So if you're having close fights and winning on points against Chisora, in my opinion, you're going to be in trouble against Joyce. But it's sport. We'll find out. Smash the like button, subscribe, and your boy will be back 100%.